Yay. Welcome back, everybody, to Cool People Doing Cool Things. Today is my first guest on the podcast. This is my friend and colleague, Dr. Erica Shick. Erica is also a dating and relationship coach and a very cool person. So why don't we start off with how we met?
So I was moving from the Chicagoland area down to Missouri. This was like the summer of 24, or thinking about coming down here, and realized I didn't know what I needed to know to be a therapist in Missouri, with licensure and just what that change would look like. So I'm searching for like a business coach, but not only a business coach, but maybe a former therapist or therapist who could kind of mentor me in that transition. And so I happened to come across one of your Facebook posts in a therapist private group, and the rest is history.
That's right. And that was so fun because that was right around when I gave up my licensure, which I feel like I'll do a whole episode on, or maybe we can just talk about the world of psychology and mental health in America and hope that we don't get disappear from big pharma. But there's a lot there. But I was giving up my license and going full time into the business coaching, consulting, marketing world. And I was doing all of it for several years and just felt like I needed to pare down a little bit. And so right before I left that Facebook group, so the group is where therapists can cross refer to other therapists. And so there's like 900 people in there. So I just said, hey, I'm leaving the group since I'm no longer a therapist, but if anybody needs any business or marketing stuff, come find me. And I think it was a year later, I got a DM from you. And so I use that as an example all the time of people are always like, well, where do I market? Where do I share? What do I do? And I think of it as like a long tail. Every seed you plant can come back. And so even if you're like, I don't know what strategy to use, it is good to have a strategy, but every little bit you do to share about what you do is like helps. So yeah. And now we work together, but we're also like friends, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
At least I don't think we ever had that. Are we friend official? But yes, we have.
But we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about a coach, is that you can be friends with your clients.
That's right. Whereas as a therapist, you really can't. There's a whole thing behind that of, I've heard stories where back in the day, those lines got crossed and it's really dangerous for the client because of that power dynamic, and it just can mess all of it up. So when I was getting ready for today, I was sitting through and listing all the things that I think make you cool. Not that I'm like the main decider of who's cool, but I was like, what can we talk about? My first thing is, and I've done this too, is relocating to a complete new city as an adult. I think that's pretty cool. It's pretty difficult too. So how has that been for you?
Yeah, I love it. So I had visited St. Louis a couple times before transitioning down here. I didn't see myself coming down to St. Louis as soon as I did, but with my life circumstance, it was just the right time. My children are young adults. They're kind of launched. They don't need me in the present sense, right? So it was like my time to go. My brother is down here. So I took that leap of faith. And we're right down in Dogtown, so right next to Forest Park. I love St. Louis. Like, I love the energy. I love the people. I think we have great food. I love all the free things to do, but probably my most favorite part about St. Louis has to be Forest Park.
Yeah.
The
That's what
weather's
sold it
not.
for me too.
Yeah, I just love Forest Park. I can't imagine not living around it someday. But yeah, and I think as an adult too, a little bit more than like if you are moving somewhere for college, right? But it's been one of the best times of my life.
Do you feel like you've changed as a person or evolved moving cities?
I think that's a tricky question because of what brought me down here in my life circumstance, right?
That's true.
The one thing my brother reminded me of when I moved down here was no one knows you. No one knows you at all, right? And so you could, if you wanted, create a whole new version of yourself. And there's no one to tell you otherwise. Not that you can't do that anywhere else. And I didn't feel like I necessarily needed to create a whole new version of myself. But I do feel like St. Louis helped me reconnect myself and finally focus on myself for like probably the first time in my life.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily say I'm an extrovert, but I love doing things and I love meeting new people. And so that's been really fun. But as I reconnect myself, I want to stay on track with this thought is I still continue to show up as the same person that I was in the Chicagoland area. So I think for some, if you wanted to create a whole new personality, move out of state and to a place where nobody knows you, and you could do that.
It's an interesting thing to do because I moved from Maryland to here it's kind of like you where I feel like anything that's kind of a challenge, even though it can be fun, I feel like it gives us an opportunity to be a better version of ourselves. And I think you and I both have that similar kind of way of living. And so honestly, when I go home now, it's been like since like 2009, sometimes people don't recognize me. That's how much I've
Mm.
evolved as a person, which is interesting. It's like you're the same, but not the same.
That's kinda cool. I haven't had that experience yet
Oh,
going
really?
home,
Yeah.
but, give it a couple more years maybe.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Just give it a couple more and see how that goes.
Yeah.
Was that your first time moving big cities?
Yeah, so I've been trying to escape Illinois for a really long time, but I was
Mhm.
married and,
Yeah.
my first husband was really committed to his career and, we, I think, wanted to raise our kids around family. My
Mhm.
dream was actually more like Tennessee or Florida.
Yeah.
Florida's a little trickier for me because of licensure,
Mhm.
reasons. I don't have anyone in Florida either, where in
Mhm.
St. Louis, I have my brother, which is important to me, at least to have one person,
Right.
like, home base. And I think Tennessee is beautiful, but again, don't really have anyone there. And
Right.
I have found it helpful to have that support person right as I'm moving. But here I am in St. Louis, and it was
Yeah.
just as good as Florida or Tennessee, in my opinion.
And you get all the seasons here and some
I do.
tornadoes.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
know, I can't imagine actually thinking about going to Florida and not having like the winter,
Yeah.
but who
I
knows?
know. That'd be a tough shift from Chicago to Florida if you
Hmm.
like winter.
Well, I wouldn't say I like it. I can
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yes. I like it until I'm ready for it to be done. So
Mhm.
so another cool thing, and this is what's funny when we do cool things, is like it becomes our norm. Like with Evelyn and her acting, people are always like, "How's it going?" And I'm like, "Oh," like it became my norm. And like now I know a few celebrities and like I can't even name some of the things that we've done, not like in an Illuminati way, in like an NDA kind of way. I feel like that happens for therapists too, in the sense that like what other profession, I mean, there's a few I can name, but it's a profession where we're literally helping people reclaim their lives. And well, I say we, I'm not doing it anymore, but can you tell me a little bit about your big why for getting into the therapy world? And like, we'll start there. What got you into therapy world?
Yeah, so it's actually my second career. My first career was in horticulture as a landscape
That's
designer.
right.
And I chose that because of the love of science and art that I've always had from as early as I could remember. I loved science and art, and landscape design allowed me to do that. I got married pretty young and then had my children at 24 and 27. However, my dream was always to go back to school after I was done being an itty bitty mom and they were launched to at least elementary school. I knew I wanted my career. And so I have a really close family member who found recovery, and that really had a large impact on me, that somebody could really suffer, as I start crying about it, in addiction, but then find their way to recovery. And
Right.
that just amazed me. And because they were such a close family member, I was also impacted
Right.
because addiction is not just a singular disease, it impacts the whole family. And so I
Right.
found myself in therapy as well. And again, therapy is an art and a science. It may not be a physical art that we can always see unless you're an art therapist, right? But
Right.
it is definitely an art and a science. And I really believe in the human potential to change, to grow, to evolve, and to be a part of that, to assist somebody with that. Just felt like my true calling. And
Hmm.
after graduating and going through school, I can't imagine doing any other career.
Yeah. I love
So
that.
yeah, that's pretty much how I found myself as a therapist.
Yeah. There's nothing like that joy when you work with somebody and you start to see them making the progress or move through the really tough stuff. So even if they're not making progress, there's something like sacred about that and being able to hold that space. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. And I work primarily with women, right? So that's probably one of my most favorite parts of my job is
Hmm.
watching her come in after like, even sometimes 3 or 4 sessions, and she gets so excited to report she had a new insight, right? Or maybe a small
Right.
behavioral change, and just to see her light up is so
Yeah.
exciting. And even as a therapist myself, I still work with a therapist weekly, and I get excited about my own progress and change,
Yeah.
right? So it's not just watching our clients, but also ourselves and
Right.
others.
It's a whole process. It's a way of living, in my opinion, of having that person that you can go to and process with. And I think of it, so right now I work with a coach, not a therapist, but it's very similar vein. And to me, because a lot of people complain about the cost of therapy and coaching, but to me, it's like every time I go to that session, I'm so proud of myself because it's like, I took this time out of my day and this out of my budget to invest in myself. And it's the greatest gift that we can give ourselves as people too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
especially women. And I like that you brought up the art and the science because what I noticed, I went to school, grad school, 2009 to 2011, and I feel like it was much more being talked about as just a science.
Hmm.
And whereas a lot of my mentors were, 20 or 30 years in already, and they saw it more as an art. So when they came through
Hmm.
the history of, the mental health training community back in like the Jungian, Freudian stuff, they called it science, but it wasn't really evidence based yet. And then we got evidence based with things like EMDR, CBT, all the different acronyms and ways of being. And I feel like in some ways it started to lose the art piece or the intuitive piece. And I feel like that's something
Hmm.
I sense you do really well is integrate that holistic like art part of it and the intuitive part with the actual science and evidence that they come together too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that, in my own experience as a therapist, working alongside other therapists, and whether it was a not for profit or a hospital
Right.
setting, or even my own therapists, I really feel like the best practitioners have really honed in on their ability to use their intuition and combine that with the evidence based
Right.
material. Because again, in my experience of just watching folks, therapists go at it hardcore with this evidence based practice, they lose the humanity,
Right.
they lose that relationship piece. And again, kind of going back to like why we aren't friends with our clients, because it would blur the line so much. And being able to really hold space for folks when they may never have had it at all
Right.
from a caregiver or a friend or a mentor is, in my opinion, one of the most important parts of our job. And being able to
Right.
watch the subtleties of their body language or tone, or just knowing when you can push them a little bit, or maybe
Right.
when you need to step back a little bit. And it takes some time to, I think, really develop that well.
It's a definite skill set. That's for sure. So
Mhm.
who do you enjoy like holding space for? Who do you work with?
I love working with women over the age of 18, whether that is to talk about complex trauma or a traumatic event, or even just growing up in a dysfunctional family, to their career, to relationship, to parenting. I think another important piece that's starting to become a really popular topic for middle aged women is perimenopause and the menopause
Yes.
symptoms.
Yes. It's
We
everywhere.
are now starting to learn about that. Not that we didn't know about it before, but our mothers didn't talk about it, is what I'm
Right.
finding out. And so I feel like women between 35 and like 50 are like, hold on, wait, what's going on? Almost every domain of a woman's life is where I can really support her, and I love supporting her. Probably the only area I don't touch is finance. Don't have anything
Yeah.
right to talk about, or I can't necessarily help her from a professional point on that. But when we think about parenting, our career, our relationships, our past experiences, becoming the best version of herself is
I
ultimately
love
what
that.
I love
Yeah.
to help with and assist
I
with.
love that. I love that. And that's I would say too, you're more of a like a coaching style counselor naturally since you are also a coach and that all of these things impact our mental health. But sometimes if we stuck with pure counseling, right, where then I feel like a lot of that stuff gets knocked out and the mental health is the only focus and it gets really myopic. And it's like you're able to see the whole picture with people and help them. Again, it's not just symptom reduction or mental health, but living your best life possible, which I think is the best form of therapy. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. And
awesome.
knowing what she wants for herself, really, and honing in on what we're going to focus on.
Right,
And then that kind of helps me determine, like, okay, does she need a more clinical approach? Right.
right,
Or is she going to progress with more of a coaching style counseling form?
right, right. So how do you explain to people the difference between coaching and counseling?
Yeah, I think that, the best way that I like to look at it is counseling or therapy is really going to be about those symptoms that we might see in anxiety, depression, PTSD, more of a past, and sometimes digging into our past, particularly since I focus on trauma so much with my clients, where coaching to me is a lot more about our mindset. We aren't going to dabble into necessarily the relationship we had with our parents. It's more
Right.
about like, okay, what is it that you want for yourself today and where are we going? Whether that's a new career, trying to figure out how to date again after divorce. It's a
Yes.
lot, that's what I would say the difference is. Are we
Yeah.
symptom reduction or are we mindset?
Right. And that's where there is an overlap for
Mhm.
sure. Because again, the coaching style counseling, one thing that I see having both coaching and counseling background too is in the coaching world, you don't need the like 6 to 8 years of training and clinical
Right.
supervision. And it's not a legal license, medical license. And I like the world of coaching because literally anybody can become a coach, but I don't like the coaching world because literally anybody can become a coach. And so sometimes, even with the right training and certification, people can cause harm and not know it because they don't
Mhm.
have that, again, the psychological training, the supervision. Then, and that's not to say I'm totally anti like certification free coaching. Like I know coaches that have never had training and they're the best. But
Mhm.
it's just you really have to watch yourself in that world. People can, what is that called? Scope creep, where people go into like they're almost acting like therapists in the coaching world, and that can
Mhm.
be that's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say even in the therapist world, unfortunately, I've came across a few therapists who maybe haven't done their own work.
Yes, me
Yeah,
too.
as you
I
take a deep breath,
have.
right?
Yes,
And that can be equally as scary. So
that's
I
why
think
trust your gut with that kind of stuff.
trust your gut.
Definitely. Yeah.
Right, right. Because there can be poor boundaries, whether that's a therapist or a coach. And so again, I think doing your research, making sure it's a good fit, feeling like you can trust this person, they have good boundaries. Because I think coaches still need boundaries, right? Like, I'm
Yes.
sure you don't let your clients text you all hours of the day or what have you,
Right.
but yeah, that could be a whole
Right.
nother probably episode.
Boundaries and women. Well, I feel like that's because one of the things I want to mirror it back to you that one of the coolest things about the work you do, especially with women in trauma and identity work, is the way I think of it is cumulatively when we do this kind of work and when women embark on this kind of work themselves, we're changing the history of women. We're changing our culture. We're owning our own shit. Then it rewrites how we show up everywhere else. So thinking about boundaries with clients and partners and friends and parenting and just being a human in the world. That's what's so cool about both therapy, coaching, and being a therapist and coach is you're contributing to that. And I think that's really awesome too. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And in my
yeah,
opinion, when the woman is really focused on her own healing and growth, and then, she's positioned better in the world than to share her strengths and her skills and her happiness. So
I love
I
that.
see it as, throwing a pond into a lake and just seeing that ripple effect.
I love that. That's so cool. What do you feel like? Because I feel like there's a lot of people talking about trauma right now. And I know, like with you and everything you do, you've got to have some kind of like, how do you explain trauma? Like, what do you think? I'm going to double barrel you questions. And what do you feel like are some misinformation pieces out there about trauma? So, what
Mm,
is trauma? What are people saying that you're like,
yeah. I would have to say, like, right now in the therapy world, there's a particular modality that is really, really popular. And, I think there's a place for it. I'm not going to
mm-hmm,
disclose which one I think it is, just out of respect. But I've had many clients kind of talk to me about it. And
mm-hmm,
they're like, great. So I know this about myself
right,
and how I might relate to the world, but I'm not really making any progress.
right,
And so, I think that it's really important with trauma that, yes, we name it, we identify it, we are educated about what it looks like, what it can look
right,
like, and how it shows up in childhood. If we're talking about complex trauma, which means repeated events
mm-hmm,
versus, one big trauma like getting into a car accident.
right,
But we have to make sure we're also working to the best of our ability as therapists to help that person advance towards what it is that they want for themselves.
right,
And the easiest way that I like to talk about complex trauma is a series of things that really moved you away from connecting with yourself.
right,
And so ultimately, as an adult and as a trauma therapist, I see myself as someone who is helping the client reconnect to what it is that they want for themselves. And sometimes
mm-hmm,
they don't know, and that's okay. So we just work together to figure that out.
mm-hmm,
But again, the simplest way that I like to talk about it is really the series of events that disconnected us from ourselves. And we figured out these strategies to keep ourselves safe and alive.
that's a good point. That's a good way to say that.
And they're
Yeah,
usually getting in the way as adults. So we have to understand what those are so we can reconnect to ourselves and put those strategies aside.
mm-hmm, that's
Um,
yeah,
and sometimes they're helpful. Sometimes they come out these strategies, right? But ultimately, if we can reconnect to who we are, then again, we're in a way better position to share our strengths, our skills, and work towards the things that make us most alive.
right. and have our own good life. You guys know this already with my dogs, but Bob is staring at me to open the door. Give me 1 second. If you could see how grumpy he looks when he does that, he's just like, look, I should have turned the camera. It's so funny. So he stole a burrito off the table this morning, and I think his
Oh my
tummy hurts.
gosh, that's
So
a
yeah,
bad dog behavior.
that's bad it's big dog behavior too. It's constant. So I know what modality you're talking about. We won't go there for the sake of what, but we can talk around it because I feel like this is an important thing. What I am noticing, and I'm not in clinical practice anymore, but I'd love your opinion, is if we stay just in the mind and just in the feel, like the intellectual processing of trauma in whatever way that looks, if we just stay there, it doesn't go away. It doesn't, because we need the bottom up approach, which is our body first and our limbic system and our nervous system and that somatic connection. And we need to be able to, what was the other part I was going to put in there? And that's it, right? It's like mind and body and emotions together. And I think with clinical work becoming so, or like the evidence based, the research based, it's so much harder to quantify, oh, I feel it right here, or where's my limbic system? You can measure a little better. But what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely believe that it is a both a cognitive and mind body approach. I also believe in a spiritual approach. And I don't
Hmm.
mean just religion or God or universe. I talk about spirituality as also what lights you up and what gets you excited.
Right.
And really, it's three pieces for me as a therapist. But again, going back to the art and science, it's really important that I understand where my client is. So if she's someone who's really up in her mind a lot, we're going to work
Hmm.
to get into our body, into our emotions.
Right.
And if she's already in her body, in her emotions, we're going to work gently to probably, try to get into the mind a little bit, right? But it's again, just knowing where that person's at and
Hmm.
matching them. But yeah, I mean, again, in my experience, I don't believe trauma work is just in the mind or how we think. I do believe we have to also be aware of how the body responds and what
Yeah.
it does during trauma.
Right. Well, and that's for me as somebody who has a little bit of childhood trauma. EMDR, which I'd love for you to explain. I did like 3 sessions of EMDR, just the part where you're learning how to create capacity, and my brain, like, I literally felt the shift, and after that point, I was able to regulate my nervous system, like, it was like night and day difference. I could not believe that difference. So can you explain EMDR a little bit?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to explain it is really helping the brain jumpstart its own natural ability to heal itself.
Mhm.
So, for some people, when trauma happens, that event and experience kind of gets stuck in certain parts of the brain, and then it can be really emotionally charged, or a lot of memories can be created. And again, these strategies are kind of blocking us from living our best lives ever. But what a trained EMDR therapist does is work to stimulate both the left and right side of the brain. So they talk to each other. And then that kind of creates this jump starting the brain process. And I love that you brought up the resourcing part,
That's what it
which
was,
is really,
resourcing, yes.
really one of the early stages of working with EMDR. And resourcing is just another word for skill development. I like to also say it's waking up the new, more healthier or positive neural pathways. Because when trauma happens, right, we can get stuck in these maladaptive or unhelpful neural pathways. So through EMDR, we really want to build up these skills to help us before we even begin to touch trauma or what we would
Right,
call the reprocessing stage. And so a lot of people will say EMDR is not great for childhood trauma. It's not because of just how complex it can be, literally
right.
complex like the its name. However, it's in my experience and opinion that if we spend a lot of time in the resourcing, a lot of time in developing that more positive and healthy neural pathway and waking it
Mhm.
up, the client may never even need to touch the trauma. I've seen a lot of progress in doing more of the calming work for them and even starting to plant in what is it that you want for yourself and
Right.
having them even just kind of think about a very small behavioral shift that they would like for themselves, or even if it's just focusing on their breath, they'll come back the next session so excited that some of the rumination may have decreased, or
Yeah.
maybe they noticed they weren't doing a particular behavior as much. So it's really interesting how EMDR can really support folks in healing and reducing some of those symptoms that we see with complex PTSD.
Right. Well, and as you're talking, it makes me think even outside of mental health, just performance. And because for me, what it did was I felt I'm a high achiever. I know you are too. And so there can be a limbic system or a stress response to that where I just always felt on. And that
Right.
can definitely be a residual trauma thing. But I also think that was part of my temperament. And when I learned how to, or when I did the resourcing, my brain was like, oh, I didn't know we could be this calm and present, and it's almost like because it learned how to do it. And then, spiritual practices and energy work has helped me with that too. But it was like, oh, I didn't know it could be this calm.
Yeah. And
Like
it's
it
so
was just so, and it's nothing, right. Yes. So. Okay, so other cool things about you. You started talking about it. So one thing I wanted to bring up here, and it's funny, by the way, Eric and I already recorded this, but shout out to Riverside because I looked at the quality and I'm like, let's re-record. So it's funny because we're having the same convo twice. So I'm not paid to say this, but Riverside's a really great podcast platform if you're looking for a place to record. But anyway, the coolest thing, not the coolest. We don't have to rank your coolness is your spiritual practice, right? And both religious and spiritual. And you and I share that everything we do is within this God-centered, this spiritual intention. So can you talk a little bit about, I don't, it's not even a specific question, but let's talk about that for you.
Yeah, so I born and raised Catholic, went to a Catholic elementary school, and still feel very Catholic, if you will, but have kind of created my own understanding and meaning of that for myself. And I think that best sums me up. My second husband called me an eclectic Catholic. And so I would very much say that that resonated with me because I do love the more spiritual side to this world as well. And for me, spirituality is creating this space where I can have conversations with God or Jesus and Mary in my heart. And the Holy Spirit is with me definitely as I do my work, whether my
Mm-hmm.
clients know it or not. And I truly believe that I'm just here trying to be a space for my clients that and doing, I don't want to say God's work because I don't think I'm doing God's work, but my work is very, I guess you could say, connected to spirit and helping people reach their fullest potential, again, to use their strengths and their skills. Because I do believe that spirit gift us all with skills and strengths. And if trauma or, experiences of this world got in the way where we can't use them, that to me is just heartbreaking.
Just from knowing you, so a lot of the therapy world's kind of strange right now in the sense that not a lot of people feel comfortable talking about spirituality as a practitioner. For a few, it kind of goes two ways. It's, we don't, I know when I was practicing as a therapist, I never wanted to, and you're not allowed to put your beliefs on somebody else. So I feel like that's part of it. But the other part is, again, it's this pendulum swing to evidence-based practices that there's like science and
Mm.
spirituality are like at odds. And they're really not at odds. And so culturally, I don't know about you, but when I was a therapist, I was afraid to talk about energy and intuition that somebody would like report me to
Mm.
like, but now there's energy psychology. But I feel like watching you build your business, you've struggled with the languaging around, yes, I'm Catholic, yes, I'm spiritual, but I'm not a Christian counselor. Like you're not like quoting Bible verses all day and like teaching and preaching. There's nothing wrong with that. It's fine that there are Christian counselors, but it's more your way of being and holding space for people is how your career and I'd say your life engages with your spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make
Yeah, I
sense?
think we were talking probably really kind of almost clinical. And then
Yeah.
I got on the spiritual and I'm like, hold
Yeah.
on, that's and
Let's
I
shift
wasn't
the brain.
ready. I wasn't on for
Yeah.
that. So my spiritual
Yeah.
side was like, wait, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would say that you're spot on because as part of even transitioning down here from Chicagoland area to St. Louis, I am in the middle of a rebrand. I am in the middle of like updating my website, right? And the colors and the logo and really crafting my message so that I
Mm-hmm.
can get my services to the right women that I can, again, assist and that they can feel like they can get the work done with a therapist / coach. And so I think that sometimes it can be hard for me to talk about my spirituality because, again, I am a very spiritual Catholic woman. And
Mm-hmm.
really none of my clients would know that at
Right.
all because, again, I'm there to hold space for them and it's
Right.
about them. That room is about them. However, the premise of my work, I truly believe is on the worst days, I'm asking the Holy Spirit to just talk for me because
Mm-hmm.
it's so important to me that my clients have that that every
Yes.
experience with me in the room is good. And as therapists, you often feel like you can't have an off day, right? So that's where my spirituality, I think, really comes into play. That like, whew, this past week's been a doozy for me in my personal life, but here I am
Yes.
with Susie or Jane, whomever, and
Right.
they still need quality
That
therapy.
is a
So
whole thing.
that's a whole thing. But yeah, for me personally, I would have to say spirituality is probably my number one guide or part of my life compass for sure.
That's cool. What are some of the, because the eclectic Catholic, can you tell us more about that? Because I feel like there's some cool stuff in there.
Yeah, I love my favorite part of being Catholic is the mysticism behind the Catholic religion and going to mass every week as a elementary age kid. Like you don't understand the transformation that is literally happening in mass and all of the
Hmm.
miracles that are happening in mass and how spiritual mass really is for us. And so I'm just like so fascinated by our stories. And to me, that really speaks to me. But the eclectic part is again, I love crystals. I love sage. I mean, I'm a fan of spiritual stores, right?
Right.
And for me personally, I believe God created crystals and stones and the um amazing landscapes and everything in this universe. And so to use crystals or sage in my house or frankincense around my altars with Mary and my prayer cards or devotional cards
Hmm.
just is part of my practice. And my favorite rosary is an amethyst rosary. I don't know what more to say about
That is
that.
so cool.
And I recently heard about the mysticism, trying to really understand that and dig into that a little bit more in the Catholic religion. And I love the definition of that sacred space in your heart with
Mm,
God, Jesus, and Mary, and all the saints and angels. I
yeah.
just love how we can pray and ask for help,
Yes.
any- right?
Yeah.
Because I think the laughing joke is like you can't always necessarily go to God. That's like the main guy in
Hmm.
charge. So
Hmm.
sometimes you have to ask for help.
Yeah.
You know,
Support's
I
another,
don't think I've
yeah.
heard that kind of joke before, but you know,
I
sometimes.
hadn't, but I have thought about, like, when I tune in, because I converted to Catholicism and a lot of people don't know that. And because I was finding I was going to different religious groups and spiritual groups and they were all cool as long as they were love-based. But when I got to mass, I could feel and like hear spirit. And I actually saw, I didn't know I was psychic yet. I saw three angels at my baptism floating and
Oh,
I
you
was like,
told
oh,
me about
that's
that. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like there were just three lights and they're flickering and but it was angel
Mhm.
shaped like in the air. It was very interesting. And I was just like, "Oh, that's cool." And so I just decided to pursue it that way, but I think we arrived at the eclectic piece differently in the sense that you had to do your reawakening as a Catholic, whereas I had to ask the questions as an adult, going through what's that called? Is it the catechism? No, it's called when you convert, it's a whole thing. But anyway, it became mystical to me. And what my conspiracy theory is a lot of the mystical parts and that relationship piece has been kind of intentionally brought out over the last few thousand years. And because
Mhm.
it empowers people. And when you can connect and you don't have to go through other people, we all have more power. And so I think there's been an intentional disconnect, not just in the Catholic Church, but with intuition in general, with energy, with connecting with God or source or whatever you
Mhm.
want to call it. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I need to do more research around that. I can't speak enough to it. But I've seen pieces and parts of the Bible that talk about looking to the heavens and looking to the stars. And
Hmm.
I'll be the first one, as you know, I'm a loud and proud Scorpio, Leo
Yes.
moon, and Gemini rising, right? So I do think astrology is important. And I do believe, again, that God created it all.
Hmm. Right.
And I do think that he communicates with us in ways that we can't comprehend as
Right.
humans. And so
Right.
I think astrology can be one way. I didn't necessarily see angels like you did, but there's just this knowing. And like for me, can sense more things, I guess you can say. So I can sense when I'm in the presence of love versus hate, if we want to use that kind of language.
Hmm.
And I've really learned to tune into what love feels like and to follow those practices. And they may not
Yes.
be today's Catholic teaching of that,
Hmm.
which is okay to me as long as I can feel that love
Right.
energy. I'm safe, just kind of mindful of that, because I've been to a
Hmm.
few different churches and a few different religious teachings of other varieties. And I always think it's really cool to learn about other religions and how they
Hmm.
practice. But there's nothing like coming home that feels just
Right.
right for me. And
Right.
I think that that's a big piece is people have to like feel what's right for them. And
Right.
the interesting part is, well, my second husband really, when I first met him, had no practice of spirituality or,
Hmm.
we might even say anti religion. But upon his passing and I guess hanging out with me long enough, he was really able to talk about his connection to a higher power through playing music or out in nature, taking care of
Mm.
his plants, or when he would care for his reptiles and fish. So it was interesting how Dan found his higher power through, I guess you could say, his hobbies. And that was different for me. But again, I think what's important is that if one is a spiritual person or religious, they find what's right for them.
Right. Right. And that's kind of, I want to come back to a few things there. Because when we're doing intuitive stuff, or recently I've been thinking about mediumship a lot naturally and like wondering if it's actually against God, right? Because sometimes people say that. And I've never believed that. I've always believed that God gives us gifts, like you said, and that's in the Bible too. But I went down a big rabbit hole. I read the book of Enoch, I read parts of the Kabbalah. And what I came back to is it really comes back to our intention. And just like you said, there's love and there's fear or hate. And if we're in that love, we're pretty much good to go. I don't know. That's my thought on it. I'm still in that rabbit hole. I'm in the Kabbalah really deep right now.
I mean,
um,
it's complex stuff, right? And it's
right.
ultimately goes back down to faith. And um, I don't think anyone has the answers as
Mm-mm.
humans on this planet. So I don't think we're necessarily talking about easy stuff to try to
Right.
figure out. Yeah.
Right. And so this brings me to the next cool thing about you. Although it's weird to call it cool, but navigating grief and loss and doing the work to reclaim your life almost in honor of Dan. So can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit around that? Because you didn't have to choose to you could have just like withered away and you didn't.
Yeah, yeah. So the passing of Dan, who was my second husband, he passed in the summer of 24, and that's what brought me to St. Louis. I felt like it was time to move from the suburbs of Chicago. And, you can learn about grief as a therapist. You can study it all day long. You can read books anyone can read a book about grief. But until you experience it as a younger person with a younger partner, I don't think you can truly wrap your mind around what it's going to look like. And
Right.
how different grief can look for people has really been pretty interesting. And aside from like even my response to his passing, what's been really interesting is my own personal journey and growth out of complex trauma and how some weird way his passing has brought me to this point of a fresh, brand new canvas where I can do the work that I also need to do to reconnect to myself that I've been doing for the last probably 25 years. But it just looks so much different after his passing. Cause again, my daughters are grown for the most part, not a little kid mom anymore. And I'm in this new city. And I think a blank canvas is the best way to put it, other than like I'm a therapist, right? Like that's what I kind of brought with me.
Right.
I think even my relationship with grief and the way I believe we move from this life experience into a spiritual one is not always popular within the Catholic religion.
Right.
But I see it as more of a spiritual experience. And we can't always explain how we meet people,
Right.
when we meet people, why we meet people. We can definitely understand and enjoy what they bring to our lives and what they leave us with even after they pass.
That's heavy. But
Yeah.
in such a word I would use is a sacred way, because that's it, right?
I think one of the cool things I have to look forward to in my future is the book that I plan on writing about my experience in life
Mhm.
with Dan as a memoir, because it is so multifaceted. And I think it has a lot of interesting little paths I can take with it that I got to really kind of hone in on what my main message will be. But he ultimately mm, I'll say I allowed myself for him to come into my life and teach me really what unconditional love looked like from a partner perspective, mirrored to me what I needed, and also provided this freedom from the
Yeah.
first part of my life into now the second part. That I'm hoping a book can really sum up a little bit better than I can in like a five
Yeah.
minute explanation
Yeah.
of this. I will never ever forget my memories of being a stay at home little kid mom. I love those days. But as we talk about relationships to date, like he's intimate relationships, I should say, was one of my greatest lessons in the most positive way. And one thing about Dan is he loved his hobbies probably more than life itself.
Mm.
And I promised him that I would live my best life ever doing my hobbies,
Yeah.
and to like waste no time. He died at 51. And
Yeah.
I think one of my biggest messages to people is like, if there's something you want to do, do it.
Hmm.
Figure out a way to do it, figure out someone to help you do it, but just do it.
Right.
I would almost like to guarantee that you won't be disappointed. But I don't know what people's dreams are out there, so I don't want to make that claim, but I would say definitely just do it because you never know
Yeah.
how much time you're going to have.
That was the next kind of question I was going to have for you is how did it change your perspective on life? And it sounds like you're already there a little bit, but can you speak more to that of how did losing your loved one change how you view life and what you're doing and all the things? Or did it?
I don't know if it really did. Like, oddly enough, I always had this weird thing with time. Like,
Hmm.
even as I mean, probably some of my earliest memories. I mean, my mom would say I was the most impatient kid. I'm still super impatient. Like, to me, it's like, we got to do it now. We got to do it
Yeah.
now because we never know what's going to happen. I wouldn't say that's a trauma response. I think that's just part of who I am. Like,
Temperament. Yeah.
the biggest thing that I've been taking away is really about this connection to myself,
Yeah.
uh, really making sure that to honor him and doing my hobbies, it's not just about doing these hobbies. It's really about being connected to myself and living my life for myself and not society, not how I was raised or what my family taught me, so to speak, to believe, but to stay connected to myself in a way that would support me to live my best life ever. Cause I know that's ultimately what he wanted.
Yeah. And it kind of gave you permission to do that. That comes full circle. I know you probably have seen this, but it makes sense why you're so passionate about what you do because I feel like there's so many, we could talk about men all day, but we'll focus on women of there's so many messages in our society to put everyone else first, to say yes to everything, to be, you know, literally everything, but take care of yourself first.
Mm.
And there's still a lot of programming around that. So for you to have in your own life and then that's what you do to help other women is pretty cool. I said
I
cool
mean,
again. I don't mean to say cool this much.
it's pretty fascinating,
Yeah.
but I guess that is the cool part of being a therapist, right? Like, I take it very seriously, my own healing and growth. And I can't, I can't do what I do unless I walk the walk and talk the talk, is how I
Right.
feel. That, one of my values that are super important to me is to be genuine and to
Hmm.
show up as, the best person that I am in this moment. And as women, we are getting bombarded by so many messages. And I mean, we could turn that into a whole nother podcast as
Right.
well.
Let's do
But
it.
let's do it because I have a lot to say about that.
Yes.
Anyhow,
Yes.
again, to me, the most important one is staying connected to ourselves. In fact, if I can share this quick story, I went to go get my
Yeah.
nails done today with my nail girl, and she went back to China after 10 years. So she came here at 24. She's 35 now, and the first thing she said to me was like, "Girl, stay single." And I was like, "Okay." She's like, "I didn't bring anybody with me back," and I loved it. And it was so interesting to hear about her story about going home to China and how much she enjoyed it and how much it opened up her eyes to what she wants to do here now
That's
that
cool.
she's back. And she's like, I need to take better care of myself. I need
Aw.
to start going to the gym so that I can feel good and essentially be the best version of herself is what she said. And it was really an interesting, she went on a rant too. I was like, okay, she's on it. Like this
Yeah.
trip changed. It was really cute. And so she was telling me about how she signed up for the gym and she's going to go make a doctor's appointment and all these things she had planned for herself.
Aw.
But to see her, focus back on what was going to make her feel good. And she's still a mom. She talks lovingly about her kids. She talks
Yeah.
lovingly about her husband. But it was really cute to see her like so focused on taking care of herself. And I was like, okay.
That's great. That makes me so happy to hear, especially someone that's in a service industry. It's so like it's just
Yeah.
default to do everything for everybody else.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the other thing. You and I know this, but I have to remind myself pretty much daily that when we are a better version of ourselves, we show up better for everybody else too.
Mm-hmm.
And so if people are struggling with taking care of themselves for themselves, it's also like, well, it doesn't have to be about you. It's also for everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's all easier said than done, right?
Oh yeah.
And usually the clients that I'm working with, the biggest barrier to that is the guilt and the shame for putting themselves first. And we really have got to work through some of that
Hmm.
before they can get to, I mean, if they make it to my office, that's awesome, right? Like we're doing really
Right.
good. But then it's a lot of the other work of how guilt can come into play or
Yes.
shame.
Yes.
Or one of my favorite tips for women dating again is you better love yourself more than you love anyone else.
Yes. Yes.
And that's a whole other
Absolutely.
topic, but,
Yes.
and that's not selfish.
No. No, it's healthy.
Mhm.
Oh, that's so good. We need to do like a whole spin-off podcast of this kind of stuff. So, as we wrap up today, I would love to know what cool things do you have on your horizon?
Well, personally, I have a really cool trip planned this summer with my brother, so I'm super, super excited about
Oh,
that,
that's right.
but I
That's
don't think
fun.
that's, like, super cool because a lot of people go on vacation.
I think it's cool.
It's cool. I mean, it's a European destination, and I
That's
get to stop
awesome.
at 2, well, actually 3 places that my genetics trace back to
Oh,
that
that's
are
cool.
newer for me that I just found out about, so I'm excited about that. Mm. That's more my personal stuff. But personally, I would have to say I'm really excited about the book that I have planned, and it's in its very infancy stage, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
You know, at least I've got it going. It's got some traction, and I'm super excited about my rebrand here in St. Louis. I'm super excited about some networking I have going on. I'm just excited about 2026. It's my
Yeah.
year as a
Yes.
Scorpio. So any other
That's right.
Scorpios out there?
That's right. Yes. We'll have to do a whole astrology episode too. And I love that because branding isn't just colors, it's a whole process and it's an embodiment process. It's an embodiment. It's an identity thing and it's fun. And so I'd love to see, sometimes we forget that our day-to-day lives are naturally cool. Like getting to network in St. Louis, getting to get out there in the world, you're expanding your coaching and counseling practice if anybody's looking, right? And
Mhm.
so it is exciting and it's easy to get stuck in the details of like, oh, I have to rebrand. So
I mean, to me, that's, like, super fun because it's so
yeah,
artistic, right?
yeah,
Like, but you're
yeah.
right, I loved how you said, like, we're doing, like, kind of cool things in our everyday life. I kind of paraphrase that maybe, but, like, I do think that you can pretty much bump into anybody on the street and ask them a few questions, and you would find something cool out about them, so
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. So true. So that's part of the medicine of this podcast as we wrap up is anybody listening, we get so caught in our day to day, look around with coolness, but also gratitude. Like I know for me, that helps me really shift my brain if I'm in like a stress mode or negative mode is like, look around and what are all the things right now I'm grateful for? I try to do it every day with my squirrel brain as my animals are barging in the door. They know it's been an hour. That's what that is.
Our alarm clock.
Yes. So that's it, right? Like looking around and really feeling it, feeling the gratitude. And what that
Mhm.
does is shift your frequency. It helps you reset your energy. And it doesn't mean the things that we're stressed out about don't exist or that we don't tend to them, but we can tend to it from a space of gratitude or from a space of it actually is really cool. A very small percentage of people live in America where we get to travel. Not that other countries don't, but we have so many things around us every day that's really cool. And when we appreciate it, it makes it even cooler. So
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah.
I'm glad that you joined me today and
Yeah, thank
we'll have some theme based episodes coming up soon. So
you. Yeah.
if you're watching this and have ideas of what you want us to talk about, let me know. I'd be so curious. And I will see everybody on the next episode. Thanks again for hopping on.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.